Happy President's Day, folks, and welcome back to #AskGSM, the weekly Money Mailbag video where I answer your questions from YouTube, Facebook, and YouTube right here on this video forum. I'm getting this day off today due to the President's Day holiday. Hopefully you guys are too, whether you're in school, work, whatever. We got a lot of questions this week, though. We got nearly 2.5 pages. A lot of great questions from YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everything. So a lot of awesome forums to answer questions from this week. Kicking it off with Pig Window after a long absence from the YouTube comments is back with their questions. First one is as follows. If the WWE were to create the next dominant faction, heel or face, which superstars in WWE or NXT do you think would be best fit for the group? A very good question, but a question I've gotten quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, which is okay, and I really don't like to answer it. Although it is a good question, it's just personally hard for me to kind of think of a certain amount of superstars on the current roster that would make for a great stable. Because like I talked about, and I think it might have been last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever it might have been, in my personal opinion, the best stables, or at least in recent history in WWE, I don't know about all time, but especially in recent years, my favorite stables, my favorite factions, such as the Nexus and the Shield in 2010 and 2012 respectively, came about in such a random fashion. I would have never imagined that they would have put three guys in the form of Ambrose, Rollins, and Reigns together to create one of the best, if not the best trio, in at least the last 10 to 15 years. Evolution was more of a forced thing, not really all that organic, and same thing with the Nexus as well. That was more organic as well and kind of got over with audiences. So, I mean, it's really hard to say. If you're talking about like a dream faction, again, it's really hard to say. I mean, I always go back to the classic example that was used in the video game WWE 12 many years ago, and it consisted of, it was like a Road to WrestleMania storyline. A lot of people may know what I'm talking about here. It consisted of Sheamus, Barrett, Regal, and McIntyre. Now, of course, Regal's retired, McIntyre's gone, so that leaves Barrett and Sheamus. And Mason Ryan would have been a good fit too, but he's since been released as well. He wasn't any good, so it doesn't really matter. And I was thinking back to the first time that someone asked me this question many months ago, maybe back in December, and it came around a time where it was like right at the time of our Revolution, whatever you want to call it, the latest NXT special aside from the one from this past Wednesday. And I was thinking of a stable involving Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, a Tommy, maybe a Sami Zayn or an Adrian Neville or someone else, consisting of like all the indie guys. And I mean, I think that'd be a sick-ass stable. I thought they were going to do something like that back in 2011 with CM Punk when he first started getting popular, and he name-dropped the Ring of Honor on an episode of Raw that one time. I think it was during the Pipe Bomb back in the summer of 2011. I think they had just signed the Kings of Wrestling, now known as Cesaro, and Cassius Ohno, a.k.a. Chris Hero, who has since been released as well as of late 2013. But I thought they were going to bring in those two to kind of form a faction. That was kind of dream booking on my part, but I thought that would have been amazing. And you also have Bryan too, and Seth Rollins. Dean Ambrose isn't really Ring of Honor, but he is quote-unquote indie, so you can kind of include him in that group as well. So something along the lines of like an indie wrestling group, and they're coming in to take over. I don't know how well it would work out, but I think it'd be pretty awesome, and involving the likes of a Kevin Owens as the leader, like we saw what he could do as a heel faction leader back in, I don't know what it was, 2012, maybe 2013, as the leader of Scum with Matt Hardy and Steve Corino back over in Ring of Honor before becoming a beloved babyface. So him as like a leader of a faction would be amazing with guys, like I said before, a Tommy, Finn Balor, a few of the other guys, the indie guys they have in the roster right now, such as Seth Rollins or Dean Ambrose, or Zayn or Neville, like I mentioned before. So something like that would be pretty cool. Other than that, I really don't have any face or heel factions in mind. Compromise of superstars on the current roster. Their second question was, do you ever see CJ Parker getting beyond a certain level in the WWE or even getting the call-up? I talked about this a couple months ago, but CJ Parker to me is like the go-to job guy in NXT right now, which is fine. You need one of those guys on the roster, whether it be in NXT, on the main roster, whatever, and he is that go-to job guy down in NXT, which is completely fine. I think as the heel, as the whole global warming gimmick, sure, it's somewhat limited, but it is original. It's not your typical. At least he has a gimmick. There is that, and he's not the worst in-ring worker in the world. He had a pretty good matchup actually with Kevin Owens back at our Evolution, and back in December a couple months ago, and I thought that was pretty cool. He's had a few other good matches with Xavier Woods and Tyler Breeze and a few others. I'm not a fan of the gimmick. I'm not a fan of him, but he's not terrible, though. I mean, he makes me hate him, but that's the job of what a heel should do, so he succeeds in that respect, but I don't ever see him being anything of note on the main roster. I think, like I said, the gimmick as it is very limited unless he evolves, but no pun intended, but I think the current gimmick that he has is fine as an undercard thing, which I think could work in the main roster. We'll have to wait and see. If he ever gets that call up, like you said, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not going to bet on it, but I think it could be, like an undercard gimmick, which is fine, which is pretty much what his talent level, in my opinion, kind of reaches. Like a Heath Slater, like you have one of those guys in the main roster. I think he could have been something more back in 2012 when they did the whole Legends storyline with him, but that aside, though, I think CJ Parker is much like Heath Slater in that you really can't do much with him, but he fits that role to perfection as a job guy, as the go-to job guy on the roster. There's third question here. What superstar on the main roster do you think is in most need of a manager, and who could that manager be? So I'm going to take the easy way out here and go with Roman Reigns. I think Roman Reigns needs a manager with the lack of mic skills that he currently has. I think he could get over. I mean, the current situation is shitty because Daniel Bryan's like the single most popular guy in the entire company, and Roman Reigns' push is coming at the expense of Daniel Bryan. The timing, like with Batista last year, is very, very poor. So maybe that's why. And I think Roman Reigns can get over on his own as a breakout babyface. Like we saw last summer, the guy was getting some of the best reactions on the roster from what I was hearing, from what I was seeing. I mean, I was at the episode of Raw on June 30th last summer where he broke out and he was in a face-to-face conversation or a confrontation with Triple H in the middle of the ring, and that was awesome, and he got a great reaction that night when he came out. So I think Roman Reigns, if they do turn him heel, and I do think they will, like we talked about last week on WrestleMania Radio, and I think a lot of people may agree with that at this point with the current work that he's doing right now, he doesn't need to turn heel this week or at Fastlane or even at WrestleMania. They need at least one top heel or a couple top heels in the division right now, which I've talked about at length with a couple of people over on Twitter, on WrestleRant Radio, whatever, in that Roman Reigns or Seth Rollins need to be atop that heel roster right now in WWE, since we only have Rusev, Bray Wyatt, Big Show, and Kane. Don't really count because they shouldn't be at that level right now. But we need another top heel because I don't know how long Rusev's going to last, past this feud with John Cena. And then you also have Bray Wyatt too, who was also getting up there, but I don't know what their long-term plan for him is past the apparent feud with The Undertaker. But if they can keep Seth Rollins heel and then they can turn Roman Reigns heel either at WrestleMania or shortly thereafterwards, I think you could have money in a Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman pairing. I think the two of those guys together would be great. And you did plant the seeds for that on the episode of Raw following the Rumble, which I know a lot of people didn't watch, and I didn't either. But I caught the highlights and I saw the interview that Lesnar, Heyman, and Reigns did. That sit-down interview, which I thought was great. And it did show a lot of potential in terms of the Roman Reigns character and the feud with Brock Lesnar, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I do think a Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns pairing would be great. Would definitely make up for the lack of mic skills for Roman Reigns. It would keep Paul Heyman around if the rumors are to be true. They're proven to be true that Brock Lesnar leaves the company following WrestleMania this year to go back to UFC. So you got to make use of Paul Heyman if he's still going to be around, and which I hope he is, because he's been one of the most consistently entertaining acts in the entire roster for the last 3 years since he came back to the company. So you got to keep him around in some role, some fashion, and pairing him with Roman Reigns, I think it could be great. Their fourth question, continuing with the manager theme here, do you see Enzo Amore potentially having a success as a manager in the WWE for years to come? So I've talked about Enzo in the past, and I think he has a lot of potential, whether it be as a manager or as a tag team guy with Colin Cassidy. I think if you break the two up, I think Colin has more potential than Colin does, even though Colin has the look, he has the size. He's not really that great on his own as a singles competitor in the ring, on the mic, whatever. He just fails to connect with the crowd. I mean, he still has that crowd connection from, the based off the whole, Jersey Shore gimmick that he and Enzo have. but he was really floundering for quite a bit when Enzo was out with an injury back early last year in 2014. And Enzo could be like the next Santino, but I think he's kind of beyond that. I'm not saying he should be like a US or an IC champion or anything like that, but I do think he has a lot of untapped potential as a manager. He's an amazing talker. He's hilarious. So if you pair him with, I don't know anyone on the current roster that he would mesh well with, but as a talker, he's amazing, and I think he could really serve as a great asset to a certain superstar. Like I said, on the current roster, I really have no idea. But if they're going to call him up, I think as a tag team would be the best thing for right now. And if that doesn't pan out, or if Colin gets released or something, then you can kind of use him as a manager for whoever. But I think for right now, especially right now with the tag team division being so depleted, and I know we have like a handful of tag teams. We've got the Ascension, Kid and Cesaro, the New Day, the Rhodes Brothers for now, the Usos, and a few other tag teams as well. But a lot of those tag teams really don't mean anything, as we saw last week in the Tag Team Turmoil match on SmackDown. They completely annihilated the entire tag team division. So that said, I think we need more credible tag teams, and if you're going to call up Enzo Amore and Colin Cassidy at any point in the near future, it should be to be inserting them in a feud with one of the current tag teams on the roster. And like I said, once they run their course as a tag team, then you can utilize Enzo as a mouthpiece for some certain superstar. Jose Cade's got a couple questions as well. As first one, will someone ever use the Stone Cold Stunner or the Tombstone Piledriver ever again? The Atomic Leg Drop, or are they all too much of Legends moves that they can't be used again without attracting hate? Good question. The Stone Cold Stunner especially, it's not like a shooting star press. Or a leg drop is different, because I think a leg drop could get over as a finishing maneuver for Hulk Hogan, especially back in the 80s. That's not going to fly in 2015. The Stunner, the Pile Driver, or the Tombstone Pile Driver, people still use it as a regular move from what I've seen in TNA and Ring of Honor, all across Japanese pro wrestling. But as a finisher, I haven't seen it, which is for the best, because you give those finishers to guys like a Stone Cold or an Undertaker, they're going to be associated with those wrestlers no matter what. So I think it's probably for the better that you don't rehash those same finishers for new superstars and whatever else. And I don't know, like you said, they might attract hate, but I don't know exactly about hate. I mean, that's very, very likely, especially given today's, with the internet, and they're definitely going to shit all over it. But I think it's definitely going to, pale in comparison to the classic finishers, the guys that could excellently execute those maneuvers like a Stone Cold or an Undertaker and so on and so forth. So probably not. I don't ever see, you never say never, but I think it's for the best that newer superstars don't use a stunner or a pile driver, because it's going to, like I said before, just make you think of that legend as opposed to that new superstar. His second question was, who would be a great hardcore champion right now if it was still around? Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose, or someone else? I've talked about before, I think the hardcore championship was very, very fun for what it was. I don't ever see it being brought back. I mean, it would be cool, but it didn't overstay its welcome or anything, but I think for the time that it was around for during the Attitude Era, and especially the 24/7 rule, which I thought was hilarious, watching back on SmackDown footage and stuff like that, old pay-per-views, Crash Holly especially was perfect in that role. But if you're talking like the 24/7 rule and stuff like that, or even not, I think anyone on the current roster that would be a great hardcore champion, and we don't need the hardcore title, but theoretically speaking, I think you named it yourself, Dean Ambrose. I think Dean Ambrose as hardcore champion speaks for itself. I think that'd be a great fit. The guy, you look back at his indie footage. You think at what he does currently in the main roster is crazy. Look up Jon Moxley on YouTube and you see some of his indie work, the stuff that he was doing before he came to WWE. It's amazing in terms of hardcore wrestling. It might have been for CZW or whatever else. I'm not a big fan of hardcore wrestling like that, like the barbed wire shit. Like, it gets way too extreme for my taste. Maybe that's just me. But you compare that stuff to what he could accomplish in WWE as a hardcore champion, it would be amazing. So I think you named him yourself. Dean Ambrose would be a great fit as a re-Christian hardcore champion. So another YouTube comment here from Nico Reviews 4. His question was, on last week's edition, you explained that the ideal way that superstars should be brought up onto the main roster includes going from a tag team to a mid-card, upper, main event scene, so on and so forth. Would you say the Miz's rise to the top would be a good example? Absolutely. That's a great example, actually. Not in the same vein of like a John Cena or a Shawn Michaels, in that, or a Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H, in that they ascended the ranks through a tag team, through the mid card, through the main event scene, and they stayed main eventers like Cena, Michaels, Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H. So they all ascended the ladder and they stayed there. The Miz, not so much, but he did have that build up though, which I do appreciate. He went from, being a tough enough guy to being a job guy over on SmackDown to being a tag team guy with the likes of Big Show and especially John Morrison. That was kind of his breakout performance before the whole thing with John Cena, which was a bust on Monday Night Raw. But the Dirt Sheet duo, they were awesome over on ECW. And then he went on to reign as United States champion for about a year and a half, Mr. Money in the Bank, and then became WWE champion when many people didn't think that he would. A lot of people thought he was going to be the first person to cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase and lose, and I'm glad he didn't. And I thought he had a great reign as WWE champion. A lot of people may disagree, but he did have a lot of good matches with Orton, Morrison, Cena. I mean, maybe not so much the WrestleMania match, but they had a few matches before and after that time that were pretty good. And he had a few other good matches on Raw with Daniel Bryan, Edge, Rey Mysterio, and a few others as well. But that said, though, I do think he had a pretty good... he did fit that build of an ideal superstar's rise to the top. Like I said, it wasn't sustained. I mean, this is the same guy that main evented WrestleMania 27, beat John Cena and successfully retained the WWE Championship. I mean, albeit with help from The Rock, but The Miz will go down in the record books as main eventing WrestleMania 27, whether people like it or not. And, now he's not jobbing now, but he's back to doing the mid-card stuff, which is great, and I think that's kind of where he belongs. Would I love to see him as world champion again? Absolutely. I don't think he's ever going to be world champion again. But that said, though, I think he's making the most of what he currently has in the mid card right now, in the tag team scene with Sandow, Mizdow, and they're doing a great thing right now. And I do think he's doing some of the best work of his career right now with the gimmick that he currently has as the Hollywood superstar, because I think that fits him to a T. But to answer your question, I do think that that is a good example of what I was talking about last week in going from a tag team, mid-card, upper main event scene to main event scene. And I think Miz had that good rise to the top. Not necessarily sustained, but he did have that rise to the top to get to that point. Justin G, he's got a couple questions here. His first one included, why do you think that the WWE sends big-time superstars like Finn Balor, Kevin Steen, and Sami Zayn to the developmental territory, knowing that they have a lot of success, or had a lot of success on the independent scene? Good question. I mean, it's pretty simple, though, in that you look at a guy like Mystico, who was a legend, a revered superstar over in Mexico for many years. They brought him into WWE in 2011 with a lot of buzz, like the next Rey Mysterio, all this other bullshit. So they signed the guy, and instead of bringing him to FCW, where he should have gone to, FCW, NXT, whatever you want to call it, they hot-shotted him right to the main roster, and the guy failed. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that Sin Cara's main event run was an absolute bust, and I still can't look at him the same way. All these years later, I still can't take him seriously in his matches against Bad News Bear for the Intercontinental title, because the guy was an absolute joke. His first year in WWE, he got injured a few times. He got suspended. His matches were terrible, and it's not all his fault. From what I heard, he had an attitude issue, and I think even Rey Mysterio said that in past interviews and stuff like that. So coming from him, who kind of knew him better than anyone else, that's definitely saying something, but I do think part of the blame has to go on WWE and the officials and maybe even Vince, whoever, for not putting him where he belongs first in FCW to kind of train, get used to the WWE style. Now, of course, the people that you mentioned, Finn Balor, especially Kevin Owens, who already wrestles here in America, Tommy I can see. Tommy's in the same kind of a league as Sin Cara in that he's not used to the American style, and he's still getting used to it down in NXT. He had one of the best matches of his NXT career to date against Tyler Breeze just this past week on NXT TakeOver Rival, which I thought was awesome. But to answer your question, though, I think it is a wise decision to have them go to NXT first, and for a few reasons. One, to get used to the WWE style. Two, to get audiences exposed to these guys. And I mean, it's a little better now because NXT is broadcast in the WWE network, and it's getting so many more eyes than FCW did so many years ago. I mean, you would train a guy down in FCW, they would come up to the main roster, no one would, except for maybe like 2 people, would know who the person was. But now that NXT is so popular right now in the WWE network, and it's getting so much buzz, as it should be, it's great to see these people, garnering a fan following down in NXT before coming up to the main roster with a lot of buzz. Paige is the perfect example, and that a lot of people wanted to see her up on the main roster, and when she finally made her debut the night after WrestleMania, she got a really good pop. Now, I don't think that would have been the same case if she was down in FCW for a few years, and no one had ever seen her work, and instead of on an NXT. I mean, granted, it was the night after WrestleMania, a lot of, British fans there, say what you want to say, but I do think that it was because of NXT, the fan following that she had there, and the platform that show being on, the WWE Network, that really helped her get a nice boost when she came to the main roster last year. But I do think it's great that they bring their, these big names, like you said, Kevin Steens, the Finn Balor's, the Sami Zayns, to NXT for a time. I mean, Sami Zayn has been down there for almost 2 fucking years. This guy could have been on the main roster a long time ago. And I'm glad he hasn't, because he finally was able to complete his story and becoming NXT champion no longer. So maybe a main event run, or not a main roster run could be coming sooner rather than later. But, for all the reasons that I just mentioned, getting used to the WWE style, getting fans kind of familiar with these different superstars, and kind of getting them ready for the main roster, kind of know what to expect and stuff like that. So I think it's great that they do that. Not forever. They don't need to be down in NXT for years, because they could be up there right now kicking ass. But I think if they were to do that, they would be nothing more than like a job guy. And I mean, people spend their years down in NXT and come up to the main roster and are still failures. And I think John at JohnKnapp17 asked a similar question. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I think there's a lot of success to be had with guys like Balor, Steen, and Zayn, like you mentioned. So I think it's great that they do that. His second question was, being a professional wrestling fan since May of 1999, I did a lot of research on finishing maneuvers, and it came about that the Styles Clash, from AJ Styles, is the least effective finishing maneuver. Don't get me wrong, I love AJ Styles, but I feel as his finisher is not effective enough. Whose finisher do you think is less effective? I don't know if that's true or not. I'm going to take your word for it. I didn't do any research on that, so I really don't know, but I'm going to take your word for it that is indeed the case. And I mean, I'm assuming that you're talking about in terms of his opponents kicking out of that move when he hits it. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. So if that's the case, Kane more so in recent years, but the chokeslam was like, one of the most devastating finishers out there for years. And I mean, Kane's been doing it for the last couple of years now. He's done it his entire career, but especially moreover in recent years, he hits the chokeslam. It doesn't make for a suspenseful near fall at all. Not only because he loses all the time, but rarely does anyone, stay down for a chokeslam. Maybe a tombstone from Kane, but rarely ever a chokeslam nowadays. So that's very, very, that's very non-effective in 2015. Not only for Kane, but for guys like Big Show too. For Miz, or with Miz for a while, the skull-crushing finale, which had put away superstars in the past, was very non-effective in that he would start using the figure 4 leg lock, and he would start using the skull-crushing finale as a regular move. Same thing with Jericho and the Code Breaker. A lot of people kicked out of that for a while. Those are the only ones that come to my mind. I didn't do a lot of research on this subject, but those are a few moves and names that come to mind. The chokeslam, skull-crushing finale, and the Code Breaker. Sometimes they put away people, but more often than not, from what I've seen, a lot of people just kick out of them just like they're a signature move, when in reality, for many years, they had been a finishing maneuver. His next question: following his loss to Finn Balor at this week's NXT TakeOver event, what do you see in the future of Adrian Neville, as he is on a bit of a decline as of late in big-time matches? Hopefully the main roster. I think Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville, like I've talked about here on the show in the past, I think are the most ready out of anybody down in NXT right now to be called up to the main roster. Like I said before, Kevin Owens, Finn Balor, Hideo Itami could all be in the main roster right now, but they had just arrived. Kevin Owens especially just came here 2 months ago and is already NXT champion. These guys, I mean, they could be in the main roster. Like I said, they deserve it. But I do think they should spend a little bit more time down in NXT. You know, mix it up with, if only just to see it, mix those guys up with the talent they have down there. But I do think the people that have been down in NXT the longest and deserve to be called up next, from the male perspective, I mean, Charlotte is also up there, but Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville. So that's probably what's next for him, which is great. I mean, he should be on his way out, putting other people over in the form of Sami Zayn and Finn Balor. So that's awesome, and I'm glad to see him finally having those dream matches before he goes up to the main roster. Like I've said in the past, I don't think Adrian Neville could be... I think, unlike Sami Zayn, he is a bit limited in where they might push him. I think, you know, sky's the limit for the guy in terms of his talent, but we're talking about WWE here and their fascination with size and giants and stuff like that. So I don't see him getting beyond a certain level. Sami Zayn is a bit different because he has the full package. He has great mic skills. He has, you know, great in-ring skills. He can connect with the crowd more so than Neville can, even though Neville has one of the most amazing finishers in WWE today. Either way, to answer your question, I do see Adrian Neville being main roster bound sooner rather than later. Cody C., his question was, in your opinion, what do you think is the most underrated feud or match of the PG era? Good question here. I mean, a few feuds came to mind. I wouldn't call Jericho versus HBK underrated because a lot of people recognize that as being one of the most amazing feuds, not only in recent years, but like of all time, and I can't disagree with that. Orton and Christian, kind of the same thing. I do think that feud, as much as I loved it and as much as, you know, as great as it was, I do think people recognize that feud as being amazing and one of the better feuds in recent years, and remember it as being one of the best of the PG era. So I'm not going to say it's underrated. Edge and Undertaker kind of stands out to me as being a very underrated feud. I thought they had an amazing feud. When you consider the storytelling involved in that feud, from the first time that Edge cashed in Money in the Bank in 2007 on The Undertaker, winning the World Heavyweight Championship, to when he returned at Survivor Series and knocked out The Undertaker and cost him the World Heavyweight title, to their match at WrestleMania 24, to their TLC match, banishing The Undertaker, blowing off the feud inside Hell in a Cell, and unlike a lot of rivals, they never revisited that feud. I don't think they ever had a one-on-one match after that, with the exception of maybe like a one-off random match on Raw in like May of 2010. I think it was like a pick your poison match or something, and it was over in like a minute after Taker won via countout or something. But point still stands is that after that feud ended, they never really went back to it like they did with Cena and Orton a million times, or a lot of these other feuds like Orton and Christian. As great as their feud was, they went back to doing that match many times over. I mean, I think a lot of people can attest that they had a lot of matches in 2013 and last year as well. Jericho and HBK, that was kind of the same thing, like with Edge and Undertaker. They did not face each other many times after that feud. I know they had that feud with DX and Jericho, not necessarily one-on-one between Jericho and HBK, though. But yeah, I think Edge and Undertaker, I mean, although it started before the PG era, I think a bulk of it, their best work, came in the PG era after WrestleMania, and especially during the summer. So if that can kind of count for a PG era feud, I would probably say that is one of, if not the most underrated feud of the PG era in WWE. Andre G's got a couple questions as well. His first one being, what feud should WWE do with Adrian Neville once he hits the main roster? Like I said before, I don't know how far he's going to get in the main roster, but what should his first feud be? It's not as obvious as it would be with Sami Zayn, like I've talked about before. His first feud, without a doubt in my opinion, should be with a guy like Cesaro, who's kind of on the decline as of late. I mean, it wouldn't mean as much as it would have been like a year ago, but they have so much history down from NXT and the matches they could put on. And Cesaro, I mean, for as far as he's fallen in the last year, is still a credible guy in WWE. He still has a lot of credentials. He's great in the ring. He still has somewhat of a crowd connection, so that'd be a great first feud for Sami Zayn. Adrian Neville is a little bit different in that I struggle to think of a person on the current roster that would be a great fit for him, like right off the bat. I mean, it's really hard to say. I'm thinking of like a mid-carder, but there's not many mid-carders down in NXT right now. Or down in on the main roster right now. That's the biggest issue, And RJ and I talked about this last week on WrestleMania Radio, in that it's like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, in that you have all these main event stars, you have your Ziglers and your Ambrose, your Cenas, your Roman Reigns, you have those guys, and then you have like the bottom of the barrel. That was like one of the biggest problems with the Royal Rumble, in that you have all these job guys, and then you have your special returns and whatever, and then you have the main eventers, and that's currently one of the biggest problems with the roster right now. And they have a lot of talent, like I said before, but the big issue right now with those guys is that there's no mid-card. That's why those mid-card titles mean nothing. And Rusev's kind of, breaking through the main event scene with John Cena, and then Bad News Barrett is kind of lower on the totem pole. He's losing fucking dark matches to R-Truth and Sin Cara, which makes no sense to me. The guy's so much potential and they're wasting that, but that's besides the question here. Like I said, maybe Bad News Barrett. And I know Bad News Barrett does not mean much right now, but I think Adrian Neville, also given their kind of UK roots, would have a hell of a feud, if not even over the Intercontinental Championship right off the fucking bat. I think that could be great. So if not, maybe like a Bo Dallas. I know he means nothing, but that kind of goes back with the Zayn and Cesaro. Neville and Bo Dallas have a lot of potential. They have a lot of history dating back to around this time a year ago when Neville beat Bo Dallas. He ended his longest reigning streak at that time as NXT champion on the first ever NXT special, and now he comes to the main roster and they kind of reignite that feud. Like I said, I don't know how much it would mean because Bo Dallas has been gone for months, and before he left, he wasn't really doing anything of note at all. But yeah, Bad News Barrett or Bo Dallas would be great first rivals for Adrian Neville on the main roster. So Andre's second question was, what are your thoughts on Dean Ambrose going after the Intercontinental Championship? As much as I love Dean Ambrose, I honestly couldn't care less. It's because that title means so little. And I like the Intercontinental Championship. Like, I like its lineage and stuff like that. I like what it used to mean. As, like I talked about last week, it was kind of that stepping stone to the World Heavyweight Championship, the stepping stone to the WWE Championship, back when it meant something in the 80s, 90s, maybe even the early 2000s. But in recent years, they have completely diminished that title, and especially in the last month or so, with Bad News Barrett losing almost all of his matches, and it makes that title look like complete garbage. So the title itself, the feud between Barrett and Ambrose, it has potential. The guys could have good matches together, which I'm excited for. The fact the title's on the line, I honestly couldn't care less. Like if Ambrose wins that IC championship, like I'll be fine with that. I'll be happy for the guy. But the only issue is that I also might be a little concerned because whoever holds that championship gets devalued. They lose almost all their matches. And I don't know if I want that happening to Dean Ambrose. I mean, I'm already as mad as it is that it's happening to Bad News Barrett. But I don't want Dean Ambrose to suffer that same fate as Barrett is currently. So I don't really care for the fact that he's going after the title. I like the idea of a Barrett-Ambrose feud. Like I said, it has a lot of potential. The fact it's over the championship, though, it really doesn't matter to me all that much. And I know some people are saying that a feud between two main event guys and Ambrose and Barrett is going to make that championship feel more prestigious. And I would like to think that too, but here's the issue on a few fronts here. One, Ambrose has, you can call him a main event star and he's over. People care about him, but he's fallen very, very far. Not too far, but he's fallen significantly since the fall when he was really, really over and he was like the number 2 guy next to John Cena. But with Roman Reigns being back and Dean Ambrose and Randy Orton turning babyface and all this other stuff, he's really kind of fallen down the pecking order in recent months, and he really hasn't kind of gotten to that same level of main event status as he was in the fall. And then you talk about Bad News Barrett. I said it before, this guy is nowhere near being on the same level of Ambrose or an upper tier guy. He should be, and he deserves to be, but he's been losing all of his fucking matches since he came back, which is a joke, because before he got injured last summer, he was really over with the audiences. People cared about him. They kind of cared about the Intercontinental title. I've talked about it at that time. The mid-card at that period in time over the summer was in a better place than it had been before. But now that he's back and he's losing R-Truth and Sin Cara and Ambrose and Ziggler and all these other people just couldn't give two shits about the guy, and it sucks. So I don't see this feud making that championship. But, still, though, I think the championship is so heavily damaged that the only way you're going to make people, if you want to make people care about that championship and who holds it, you have to make the champion mean something. You have to make them credible. You have to make them win matches. And it's, maybe it is harder said than done. I'm not really sure. We'll have to wait and see. But I think it really is. It's not that hard of a concept. You just make the champion win every once in a while in non-title matches. I mean, it's not that difficult of a concept to kind of go with here. I mean, you just make Bad News Barrett win a few matches and, you know, have him hold that championship for a decent period of time. I mean, you think that championship since July, since for like the last 6 or 7 months, that title has changed hands. Let's count right here. Let's see. After Bad News Barrett vacated the first time, Miz won it in that Battle Royal at Battleground. Ziggler won it at SummerSlam. And I'm counting my fingers here. And then Miz won it Night of Champions. Ziggler won it back the next night. Then Luke Harper won it at shortly before Survivor Series. Ziggler won it at TLC. He lost it to Barrett. So in the last 7 months, the title has changed hands 7 times. So that's like once a month, which is ridiculous. And there's a lot of differing, you know, point of views on that. And I mean, I'm not going to go on a whole tirade on that here. But to go back to your original question, don't really care for the IC title match all too much, but I do like the idea of an Ambrose Barrett feud. I went way off topic there, but that's the bottom line for that question. Your third question here, what 2 divas from this generation you think could main event Monday Night Raw? I think that's something that may never be done again. The feud between Trish and Lita and its history and the people involved, obviously 2 of the greatest of all time, may be something that may never be replicated. Like I say never. It could happen again. I'm not going to completely rule it out. But with the way they book the women right now as compared to 10 years ago when they first did it, I never really see it happen again, or at least any point in the near future. But if they, let's say, by some miracle, they start booking the women like they should, like they do down in the fucking NXT, their rookie territory, their developmental territory, which is outshining the main roster women by leaps and bounds. And I don't blame that on the main roster women. I more so blame it on their booking and the creative whatever. But by some miracle, let's say the Divas division is in a better place, in a way better place than it is right now. 2 divas from the main roster that I could see main eventing Raw. And this kind of ties in with your next question, so I'll kind of say that question too. You said, Charlotte said in an interview that she will main event a WWE pay-per-view. What are your thoughts on this? And who could you think that could share this moment? Who could you think could share that moment with her? So I'll kind of tie those questions in together. And then a lot of people see Charlotte as the next big thing in the Divas division. We also said the same thing about Paige. And she did have a lot of success in the last year since she came to the main roster. But they've botched her much like they did everyone else who's come up from NXT, for the women anyway. Like they did with Emma. They ruined her and her potential by bringing her up with fucking Santino of all people and whatever else. And that whole feud, I mean, a Paige-Emma feud to me, like a Paige-AJ feud is what we all saw as the next Lita and Trish. And they botched that feud by kind of with a lack of character development and some underwhelming matches and whatever else you want to say. So that would have been like the 2 divas. That would have been, if you asked me this a year ago, that would have been my answer. But, you know, all these months later, Charlotte, I think, is really coming into her own. Her and Bayley, her and Sasha, who have a lot of amazing chemistry. Her and AJ, I think, could have an amazing series of matches over the women or Divas Championship, whatever. I don't know if you can main event a pay-per-view. Like I said last week when I answered the question, when someone else asked that, you got to main event Monday Night Raw first before you can main event a pay-per-view, much less. But Charlotte, I think, is way up there in terms of potential candidates who could accomplish such a thing. I think officials are very high in her, and rightfully so. She's very talented. She's very good-looking. She has a lot of potential. So I think Charlotte and maybe like an AJ if she was on her way out or something, or a Paige, I think it'd be great too. Because remember, when Paige was leaving NXT, that was when Charlotte was really starting to get her push and really starting to come into her own as a single star done in NXT. So we really haven't seen much from Paige and Charlotte in one-on-one action. So that could be an amazing feud if they kind of get Paige back to relevance. That could be a great feud over the Women's Championship or the Divas Championship, whatever the hell you want to call it, when she eventually gets called up. Leroy W., his question was, who do you want to see face Brock Lesnar for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania? Kind of comes down, obviously, to Roman Reigns and Daniel Bryan. The thing is that it's like a lose-lose situation in that Reigns versus Lesnar, I wouldn't mind. I'm completely okay with it. I've said that in the past. It has potential. They showed that potential in that backstage interview they did the night after the Royal Rumble on that Snowden edition of Raw. The interaction those two had on that show I thought was great. And if you can build off that, I mean, Roman Reigns' popularity is still in question at the moment, but if you can get people to rally behind Roman Reigns and then get heat back on Brock Lesnar and stop endearing him to the audiences, then I think that could be a great kind of not really David versus Goliath. That would be Daniel Bryan versus Lesnar. But I think it could be a great dynamic going into WrestleMania. Daniel Bryan would have been and still is my pick. Like, I would love to see him go on to main event WrestleMania again for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship in a David versus Goliath matchup. But like I said before, I'm a sucker for a great story in wrestling, and that would not make for the best of stories, because then you have what would be the point to have Daniel Bryan win at Fastlane? And then what the hell is the point of Roman Reigns winning the Rumble? Like, that makes no sense. And then what the hell do you do with Roman Reigns? And I don't want to see another triple threat. That is out of the question. We saw that last year. We've seen a lot of triple threats in recent years, and I don't want to see another one, especially if it's going to be akin to the one that we saw last year. So that's out of the books. So it's either Lesnar versus Reigns or Lesnar versus Bryan. I would love to see Lesnar versus Bryan. I think the story is there. In terms of, like, the dynamic is there, I should say. The buildup is not. They kind of fucked this all up with the whole Roman Reigns Rumble win. If they just had Bryan win there, this would have been all avoided. But they did not do that. So, of the two, I would rather see Daniel Bryan main event at WrestleMania. But if it came down to Reigns versus Lesnar, which I think it still will, I have no problem with that, because at least it's a fresh feud. I think Roman Reigns will be the first one that Brock Lesnar has worked with since he returned to the company 3 years ago that is a fresh face aside from CM Punk. You think of the guys that Lesnar has worked with: John Cena, The Undertaker, The Big Show, Triple H. These are all solidified stars, and granted, CM Punk was too, but he was a lot newer star than than Triple H is, or The Undertaker, or John Cena. All people who Lesnar worked with, more or less, in his first one with the company 10 years ago. Paul Leslie's got a couple questions here. We all know that this is a last stop at his celebrated career, but do you think it would be wise if at age 55, Sting would hold any WWE championship or any WWE title before he finally retires for good? So I talked about this a couple months ago from what I can recall, in that obviously Sting, to solidify his legacy, he's already fucking Sting. He's going to go into the Hall of Fame no matter what, so he does not need to hold a championship in WWE in order to prove himself to the masses. He's Sting. He's going, even if he didn't come to WWE, he is still a legend. So that said, all I'm looking for is one match from Sting at the very least, and which is obviously we're going to get that at WrestleMania with him versus Triple H. That said, to answer your question, to hold any WWE title, like, I don't see him holding the IC championship, because like I said before, that title means absolutely nothing. And I don't really see a purpose in Sting being WWE champion. And it's not even like Brock Lesnar winning that championship. It's not like a part-timer holding that belt like Rock did a few years ago and Brock Lesnar is right now. Those guys are working more dates than Sting. Sting signed on for like 4 dates. Lesnar signed on for at least 10, for at least twice that. And Sting's not going to work like at the ordinary pay-per-view. And I know you can give Sting the belt and then take it off in the next night, whatever you want to do. But it's like giving Undertaker the belt. It makes no sense, because the guy works once a year. So I really see no purpose in that happening. And I don't see Sting coming back for another match until, after this year's WrestleMania, maybe next year for a match against The Undertaker. So, that said, why would you put the title on Sting? There's like no point in the next year that you would do that, because I don't see Sting working any more matches from this year's WrestleMania to potentially next year. So I don't really want to see it. I don't really care for that. I didn't like Sting as a full-time wrestler over in TNA, because he was so overexposed. He was wearing a shirt to the fucking ring in like every single match. His match against Magnus at the 2013 Bound for Glory was an embarrassment, and I'm sure he can put together a better match with Triple H at WrestleMania, given that the story is there. But as long as he's not wrestling every single Raw or every single pay-per-view, it's fine. But that said, there's really no reason to put a championship on Sting if he only works once or twice a year. His second question was, Rhino and the Brian Kendrick, they both recently returned at the NXT tapings. I apologize if that spoils anything for anybody, but it's all over the internet, so I'm sure that's not the first time you've heard it. But who do you think would be the next to make a WWE comeback? So if you told me a month ago, who I would think would be coming back to NXT or coming back to WWE, I would have never said in a million years Rhino, or especially Brian Kendrick. Rhino was over in TNA as of like 2 or 3 months ago. This guy was working with EC3, and I'm ecstatic. Don't get me wrong. When I heard the news that Rhino came back at the NXT tapings, I was so happy. I'm still reeling from that. I never got to see Rhino work in WWE during his first run. Obviously, I started watching in 08. He left in 05. But watching back clips of him on YouTube, the guy is awesome, and I'm so glad he's back. Not for like a full-time return, but I'm guessing he's doing something on NXT and on TV. I think starting this week, so that's going to be awesome. Brian Kendrick too, like that was so random. Another guy that was over in TNA for a few years, and his WWE came to a close in 09 after kind of on bad terms after he had a huge weed problem, and that was kind of more or less the reason why he was released at the time that he was. But I guess he was at the most recent NXT tapings working as a trainer, and he might have worked a dark match at the NXT tapings or maybe on TV. I'm not sure. If he worked TV, I'm looking forward to it. Brian Kendrick, he could have never been WWE champion or anything, even though he was technically for a time in that Unforgiven Scramble match, that whole clusterfuck of a match at Unforgiven 2008. But, I think he did have potential, though. I thought Brian Kendrick was very good. He was trained under the tutelage of Shawn Michaels, so that says a lot. That said, though, I don't think they're making like full-on returns, but I am glad to see them back, if only for one-off returns. And I've talked about this in the past, in that since 2010, we have gotten at least one big-name return in WWE. In 2010, it was Bret Hart. 2011, The Rock. 2012, Brock Lesnar. 2013, Rob Van Dam. 2014, The Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, and Batista. So who's it going to be in 2015? I posed that question at the start of the year. I've got a lot of interesting responses. Some people said the Dudley Boys, which we did get in the Rumble. We got Bubba Ray Dudley. I wouldn't put him necessarily on the same league as obviously like as a Brock Lesnar or a Rock or even a Rob Van Dam, because at least Rob Van Dam came back for like a full-on return in 2013 and 2014 as well. Bubba Ray was only in the Rumble once, and he may come back for a return. I don't really know. But maybe he will go down as the best return for the first time in 10 years. We'll have to wait and see. Definitely Rhino and Brian Kendrick aren't on that level, even though it's cool to see them back. But I think it would be great. I mean, I'm not saying this is the next WWE comeback. Like, that's your question. I don't know who's going to be the next one to return. Like, if you told me Rhino and Kendrick were coming back, I would have never guessed those two, obviously. But still, the one person I would love to see come back to the company this year would be Goldberg. I've never been a huge Goldberg fan. Like, if he never returned, I'd be completely satisfied. Like, I don't really care all too much. But it would be sweet, though. Like, in the time that I've been a fan for, I was never able to see Goldberg in WWE. It's been almost over 10 years to this point that he's been last seen in WWE, so it would make a major impact if he was to come back, if only for a one-off match. And I know he was close at one point, either last year or the year before, but I don't think the money was there, the money wasn't right, or something like that. But I would love to see Goldberg back in WWE for a one-off return. I've talked about this before, but Jeff Hardy, Kurt Angle, guys that aren't coming back anytime soon. They recently re-signed with TNA for at least the next year. Scott Steiner would be another cool one-off return, but I know he buried Triple H a couple years ago, so I don't think it's all too likely that we'll be seeing Scott Steiner in WWE, but never say never. I mean, a lot of people have buried the company over the years and still come back. But regardless, so I think it would be cool if we could see a Goldberg or a Hardy or an Angle, not necessarily as the next big comeback in WWE like your question posed, but I would love to see any one of those three guys back in the company at some point. Next question, Solomon Crow, Bull Dempsey, and Baron Corbin. Among these three I mentioned, who do you think will be the next great heel in NXT to dominate the main event like Rusev and Seth Rollins? Dominate like the main event of the main roster, or dominate the main roster? I didn't know exactly what you meant by that. But of those three that you mentioned, it would have to be Solomon Crow. I mean, Bull Dempsey is okay, but they fucking ruined the guy by having him job out to Baron Corbin 3 times in a row. And the match someone else asked this question, I'll get to it in a little bit. The match at NXT TakeOver between those guys was really not that good. It was botches galore, not a lot of botches. I mean, they are in developmental, so you gotta, it's obviously to be expected. But they never really had good chemistry. I mean, compared to everything else on the show, the match was shit. So Bull Dempsey, I don't really see him become anything like great. Baron Corbin, I think we still have yet to see a truly breakout performance from him. He had a pretty good matchup with Adrian Neville last week, or the week before. but we still need to see how he can do in longer matches before we can truly evaluate what his potential is in the company. Solomon Crowe, from what I've seen from him, is a great talent. I don't know how far the hacker thing is going to get him on the main roster or even in NXT, but from what I've seen from that gimmick and from what I can imagine they can do with it, I think it's sweet. A lot of people don't think so. I think the hacker thing is so fucking cool, and I think he can make it something awesome. We'll have to see. I think he debuts this upcoming week in NXT, so I'm excited for that. Fingers crossed that it goes as well as it's been hyped up to be for the last few weeks. And I mean, this has been highly anticipated for years now. I mean, people have been waiting to see this guy debut on this show for a very long time. Still, though, I'm looking forward to that. So of those three, I think Solomon Crowe, I don't know about the next great heel to dominate the main roster, like you said, in the role of a Rusev or a Seth Rollins. But he does have a lot of potential, though. I mean, he has there is something there with Solomon Crowe in terms of his work on the mic, in the ring, and whatever else. So I look forward to him. Bull Dempsey is not like the next Rusev. Rusev has really improved a lot in like the last year and a half since I first saw him in NXT, but Bull Dempsey is nothing special, and Baron Corbin, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, I think he could be something big too if they book him properly. His first loss came in very anticlimactic fashion, but I do think with the look and the aura about him, he comes off like a star, and I think they could do something with him if he can show that he can work more than a few minute-long matches. So we'll have to wait and see in terms of Baron Corbin. And Paul's final question here, why didn't things work out for Andy Levine, who won the 2011 Tough Enough contest? I love Tough Enough. I love the 2011 season of Tough Enough. I hated the fact, however, that Andy Levine won. So there's a couple reasons why things didn't work out for Andy Levine in WWE. For one thing, he was already under contract to the company when he won this competition. Unlike everybody else, he was the only one of that entire bunch that was already under contract to WWE. I forgot what his FCW name was, but he had already worked a few FCW matches. And then he wins this. He had the whole Silent Rage thing, which was like, okay, he has that, but it was very limited. And the promos they put out for him were like atrociously bad. He was terrible on the mic. He sold that stunner like when he first won his contract. I mean, I can go on for hours in terms of how terrible this guy was. Maybe it's just personal bias because I thought Luke Robinson was the fucking shit, and he could have been something amazing in WWE, but I digress. Andy Levine, the promos they put out for him was not good. When he sold that stunner, like I was mentioning about before, the night that he won his contract and he sold that stunner, it was so terrible. He sold the stunner and then he gets right back up. Like that was the moment, if there ever was one, that told me that he was going nowhere in WWE. So he had that, and then like a month later, a month after he wins his contract, he gets suspended for violating the wellness policy. For what? I have no idea. But of course, that was not a good sign either. And then he would eventually get released from his contract in April of 2012 after the report came out that he was quote-unquote not progressing. He wasn't getting any better, so they let him go. So why have him win the fucking competition in the first place? Like, there were so many things wrong with him winning. And that's why I was so fearful about this show ever returning. And they're thinking, okay, the person who won the show the last time was a complete flop, so why should we bother doing it again? And I love Tough Enough, and I wanted to see it come back, and it is coming back, thankfully. So, thankfully, that was not the case. But that was one of the biggest issues with that season was with who won. I think Luke Robinson had the entire full package, and maybe they went with Andy to kind of swerve the audience. I don't really know, and I'm sure if you asked Stone Cold, he would have said Luke, because Andy was no good. And so, yeah, that's why things didn't work out for him, because he was not getting any better in FCW. So they said, to hell with it, we'll just get rid of him. And he hasn't been back since. Hopefully he won't be back. He was never any good. He's like almost 40 now or something like that. But, yeah, that was why. That is the reason why things didn't work out for Andy Levine in WWE. Next question here comes from Zach M. from Facebook. His question was, with how boring these 3-hour Raws are, what would you do to try to make 3 hours of wrestling more exciting? Me personally, instead of an authority promo to start off the show, I would have some sort of cruiserweight division to start the show to get the crowd going. I think that's a great idea. That's what WCW, of course, before it tanked back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, that is exactly what they did to kind of make good use of that first third of the first hour of the three with the cruiserweights, and that was what they were kind of known for in their kind of final years. That was one of the saving graces of Monday Nitro, was the cruiserweight division, and they utilized that third hour to the best of their ability with those cruiserweights. Raw is a little different in that the format is way different now. Like you said, they always kick off with the same shit every single week. An Authority promo, John Cena comes out talking, Seth Rollins or whoever else just comes out talking for at least a half an hour. And then in the first hour of the show, you only get maybe 15 minutes of match time, which is ridiculous for a 3-hour show. And I mean, I don't necessarily agree with the 3 hours. Of course, nobody does, and it should go back to 2 hours. But that said, it looks like it's going to be 3 hours for the foreseeable future, so there's really no point in complaining about it. So you just got to make do with what you have. With the third hour, or with the first of the three anyway, I think it would definitely benefit them. I like the Cruiserweight division idea, and I've been petitioning for the return of the Cruiserweight division for quite a while, or light heavyweight division, whatever. With the people that you currently have, you don't need to bring in new talent if you don't need to. There's so many people down in NXT and right now in the main roster that aren't being utilized and can be used for that reason if they're going to bring back that division. But that said, though, there are other ways that you can utilize that first hour, such as just kicking off the show with a match. I mean, that's just something so simple, what they've done before. It might have been, I don't remember the last time it happened, but it was at least maybe a month or two ago. They switched up the format of the show. They kicked it off with a match instead of a promo, and it was great. And just little stuff like that kind of gets the show off to a great start instead of the 30-minute promo, like you said, which kind of drags down the crowd, loses interest, and whatever else. So, I do like that idea, but there are other ways to do that as well, such as just kick off the show not only with a Cruiserweight division match, but with any other match, with a main match or a mid-card title match, something along those lines. Just in-ring action to kick off the show as opposed to a fucking 30-minute promo that's going to kill the crowd for the rest of the night. So I do agree with you there. There are better ways that they could be formatting the show so it doesn't seem so formulaic. Matt Reborn again from Twitter, his question was, if you had to pick one, what was your favorite WrestleMania event? So for the entire road to WrestleMania, I've been watching all the old WrestleManias on WWE Network and whatnot. So it's hard to say that any of those are my favorite because I wasn't a fan for them per se. I watched a lot of good ones. 10 was really good. 14 I really enjoyed as well. 13 was also very good. And I'm getting to the later teens right now. I'm watching 16. 17 was also, of course, one of the most, one of the best, if not the best, WrestleMania of all time. But it's hard to say that any of those are my favorite, which is what your question was because I wasn't a fan for it. So, that said, of all the ones that I've been a fan for, dating back to 25 and 09, I would have to say my favorite was 28. 30 is up there. I thought 30 was amazing. There are some parts of it that I was not a fan of course, like with Cena going over Wyatt. That whole match I did not like. Brock Lesnar versus The Undertaker, despite the streak ending, the match itself was terrible, and I was not a fan of that whatsoever. So, but the rest of the event I really enjoyed. Cesaro's win, even though it didn't really lead to anything, that was still a great moment. The tag team title match on the pre-show even, and the two Daniel Bryan matches, the opener with Triple H, and the triple threat with Orton and Batista were both fantastic. And I thought WrestleMania was amazing. You can even argue that WrestleMania 30 was better than WrestleMania 28, but in terms of my favorite WrestleMania, it would have to be 28. The undercard was okay. It really wasn't about the undercard, though. It was all about the main events. Jericho and Punk was really good. Even though I enjoyed their Extreme Rules match a month later a little bit more, their match on that show was still very good. Triple H and Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as a special guest referee, I thought was phenomenal, as well, or no pun intended. I thought that was phenomenal. And the main event between Rock and Cena, you can give that match all the shit in the world that you want, but I thought that was great. Not from an in-ring standpoint per se, but from a storyline, from a storytelling standpoint. In the year that they built up that matchup and made it mean something and split the crowd in Rock's hometown of Miami, I thought it was amazing. So I thought that match was great too, and that kind of rounded out one of the better WrestleManias in recent memory. That or 24, which I've seen bits and pieces of. I'm going to watch it in its entirety pretty soon. But if I had to pick one WrestleMania event that was my favorite, for right now it'd have to be WrestleMania 28. At Unsolved22, his question was, since WWE is all about those elaborate WrestleMania entrances, could you see them doing a Kevin Owens versus Finn Balor match at WrestleMania? Good question. Not on the main card, obviously, or at least anytime. Like, I could see those two wrestling at WrestleMania next year or part of the main roster. If you're talking about, like, on the pre-show or something, which a lot of people have petitioned for, I think someone asked about it last week. I wrote an article about it like a year ago, saying that they should do something like that, where they get the NXT title match on the pre-show, which would be great. It'd be awesome exposure for the network, for NXT and all that other kind of stuff. So I think that'd be great. And of course, Finn Balor is the current #1 contender after last week. And I don't know if they're doing that match at the upcoming NXT tapings. I don't read the spoilers. I don't want to know the spoilers. So we're gonna have to wait and see. But they could do an Owens Balor match. They could do Owens Zayn. It doesn't really matter. A triple threat with those three, which would be fantastic. But either way, I would love to see NXT represented in some way at WrestleMania this year on the pre-show. But I like your idea, though, since they're all about the elaborate entrances. And I think the entrances from last year were like one of the better parts of WrestleMania 30. Triple H's King of King entrance was amazing. Bray Wyatt being sung to the ring by I think Mark Crozer, his name was, the guy who sings his entrance theme. They sung him into the ring. Rev Theory for Randy Orton, which was great. So, they could do something similar with Kevin Owens and Finn Balor. They're not going to be sung to the ring by like CFO Money or whatever the band's name is, but that'd be a great. I think Finn Balor's entrance in WrestleMania would be a spectacle, to say the least. I don't know if it's going to happen this year, WrestleMania. It would be sweet though. If it doesn't happen this year on the pre-show part of the NXT title match, at the very least, next year or the year after, I think Finn Balor is going to be in the main roster and just ripping shit up alongside Kevin Owens because those guys are great. But a match between those two for the NXT title at WrestleMania in the pre-show, hashtag book it. At Ninja Rollins, his question was, when do you think Randy Orton is going to return? At this point, is it even bother we're speculating about? Because we've been looking forward to this for months. I mean, I thought it was going to happen at Survivor Series in Orton's hometown of St. Louis. I thought it was going to happen at TLC. In the John Cena-Seth Rollins match. That obviously didn't come to fruition. I thought it was going to happen in the Rumble, and I guess it was going to happen in the Rumble, but they nixed plans to have Orton come back in that match, and they've been delaying it ever since. I mean, as of this recording, I'm recording this on Monday morning, so they could be having him return tonight on Raw for all you know, if you're listening to this after Raw. But, so we really don't know. It could happen this Sunday at Fastlane. It could happen next Monday. At the latest, I would say, next Monday. But then again, I thought the latest would be Royal Rumble, so I really don't know. I mean, it's not even worth speculating about because they keep on pushing it back. But either way, though, he's been getting great reactions from what I've been hearing and from what I've been reading on the live events that he's been wrestling at. And, he was in the role of his career before he got taken out back in the fall. So I think when he comes back, he's going to be a hot-ass babyface and a great feud to Seth Rollins on the road to WrestleMania, which is going to be great. So at the latest, probably next Monday. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they pushed it back even more. But WrestleMania this year, they only have 5 weeks. 5 weeks from Fastlane to WrestleMania, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's less time than Hell in a Cell. They built, 6 weeks to get to that pay-per-view and only 5 for their biggest show of the year. That makes no sense to me, but that's just the timing because I guess the following Sunday this year is Easter, so they can't do it then. Maybe they could have pushed Fastlane a week early. I really have no idea, but still, though, I think Randy Orton's going to return either, I don't know about tonight. Maybe it is tonight. I don't know, but either this Sunday at Fastlane or next Monday and Monday Night Raw. I mean, we're going to have to wait and see. I mean, only one can hope. I mean, only time will tell. But at John Knapp 17, his question was, who do you want to see Dolph Ziggler, Ryback, or would you want to see Dolph Ziggler, Ryback, and Eric Rowan tag team at WrestleMania this year, or is it even worth getting them on the card? John and I were talking about this in potential WrestleMania matches that you could have these guys in, and it scares me because all three of these guys, more so Ziggler, and Ryback to an extent. Eric Rowan, not so much. I couldn't really care less if he's on the WrestleMania card this year. But Ryback and Ziggler are kind of having career resurgences right now, so to not have them on the WrestleMania card, or at least not in a meaningful match, is a disservice to them in their respective pushes. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up in the Battle Royal this year, the Honor the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, or some other throwaway matchup, which sucks. But, I mean, if you look at the WrestleMania card, where do these guys fit in? You have Triple H and Sting, either Reigns versus Lesnar, or Bryan versus Lesnar. You have the title match. Orton and Rollins, Cena and Rusev, Wyatt and Undertaker, presumably. So as of right now, there's really no place in the card where these guys are going to fit in. So, which sucks, because I think Dolph Ziggler does deserve a one-on-one match at WrestleMania. He's been with the company since, as Dolph Ziggler, or at least with the company as a whole for the last 10 years, and this guy's never had a one-on-one match at WrestleMania, which is insane to me. Ryback, I would love to see him face, I would have wanted to see him face Rusev. I think that's out of the cards at this point, which is terrible. They never really resolved that feud, so I don't know what the point of that was. But, I mean, I think getting them on the card is better than not. I mean, in a tag team match, I would rather have them do a 6-man with those guys, or a tag team with Ziggler and Ryback, than not having them on the card at all. I mean, that's like costing the guys a payday. I mean, to have WrestleMania without Ryback or Ziggler would be a joke. I know it's not, I mean, they're not on the card where they should be, like Ziggler isn't in the one-on-one match that I would want him to be, but it's better than, having him in a tag team match. Having him in a tag team match, I think, is better than not having him on the show at all. So I would settle for that. I wouldn't be too happy with it, but it's better than them not being on the show at all. I mean, you got to give these guys a payday, and they deserve the spotlight. So I would settle for that. They deserve better, but it is what it is. At Daniel Cabeza 59. He's got a few questions here. His first one is, who is the best in-ring worker in WWE right now and why? My obvious answer would either have to be, actually it's not an easy answer. I wrote down Daniel Bryan here, and that still stands to me. He still stands to me as the best worker in WWE right now in terms of getting the crowd on his side. And the crowd support, his in-ring matches are always awesome. He can get a great match out of whoever he works with. So I would have to go with Daniel Bryan. Either he's up there with Seth Rollins or slightly above. Seth Rollins has proved, even long before he turned heel, he was always one of the best workers in the company. Go look back at his work in the Shield, and almost a year ago to this very week, I think, a week ago from next Monday, or a year ago from next Monday, that in the Wyatt versus Shield match at Elimination Chamber, phenomenal stuff. Easily one of the best matches, if not the best match of the year. And, he showed in that match his true potential as a babyface when he eventually breaks out as a babyface, which should be down the line, not too soon, because I think right now he's doing some of the best work of his career as a heel. So that said, I think Seth Rollins, you go back and look at his work in the Royal Rumble match just recently, that was amazing, his match with Lesnar and Cena. So that goes to show that he is also among the best workers in the company. Ziggler's also up there as well, but it would definitely have to either be a tie between Bryan and Rollins, or it would have to go with Bryan in terms of crowd support and stuff like that. So they're definitely on par with each other in that category. His next question was, what is your opinion on NXT superstars going to the main roster with the horrible booking nowadays? It sucks. It's not the case for everybody. For every Shield, you get a Bo Dallas. For every Page, you get an Adam Rose. They bring these people up to the main roster without having a plan for them. I know at one point there was an agenda set out by Triple H. There was a mandate that said, do not call up any of these guys to the main roster if they don't have a plan for them. So I don't even know why they bothered to bring up Adam Rose. Bo Dallas they had a plan for in the temporary, not really necessarily long term. They had him do the undefeated streak, and after that ended, they did next to nothing with the guy, which sucks. But, it's terrible. I think a lot of these guys are talented. Adam Rose, his gimmick is not good. But if you go back and watch his work in NXT as, not necessarily as Adam Rose, but as Leo Kruger from about a year or two ago, the guy's a great wrestler, and they could be doing a lot more with him than they are right now. So it really is terrible, and they should not call people up to the main roster, not only if they're ready, but like the Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville thing. They've been down in NXT for close to 2 years now, and I'm probably glad that's the case, because if they brought them up to the main roster a year ago and they didn't have a plan for these guys, they didn't have a place in the card for them, then there's really no point. They might as well be just staying down in NXT, where they could have great matches, great storylines, and whatever else. So it's terrible that they are going up to the main roster without good booking, but hopefully they've learned from their past mistakes in the form of a Bo Dallas and an Adam Rose. And, for every Rusev in the Shield, there are those kind of guys, but hopefully they can continue to, when they call up guys like a Zayn or a Neville or a Charlotte, they have plans for these people before they, just bring them up for no reason and continue to waste them, which would suck. His next question was, what is your opinion on the Bray Wyatt versus Undertaker match at WrestleMania? Because in my opinion, neither of them can lose. And I could not agree more with that sentiment, in that I've been saying this for weeks. Bray Wyatt versus Undertaker, the match, the feud itself, I think could be very, very good. You combine their respective supernatural personas. Maybe it would suck. I really have no idea. But, from a storyline standpoint, I think it kind of writes itself. That was one feud that a lot of people wanted to see when Bray Wyatt got promoted to the main roster about a year and a half ago. And, of course, the streak ended. I don't think the streak necessarily has to be on the line. But the issue is with this feud, with this match at WrestleMania, like you said, neither of them can lose. I know to a lot of people it's an obvious answer that Bray Wyatt wins. Why wouldn't he win? He lost last year to John Cena, which I still think is terrible booking. Why they did that, I have no idea. But Bray Wyatt needs to win, because he can't go 2 years in a row at WrestleMania losing. After all the momentum that he's been built up in the last few months in his feud with Dean Ambrose and the wins over Dolph Ziggler and Daniel Bryan and everyone else, the guy needs a win at WrestleMania. However, at the same time, and I know Bray Wyatt, it would make sense because he's beating a broken down Undertaker who was not the same that he used to be. I understand that, so that makes sense. Undertaker, however, also cannot lose. especially if they're going to do the match with him and Sting at WrestleMania next year. And I'm all in favor of that match because I don't think Sting needs to win. If he wins this year against Triple H, and he probably will, then there's no point in having him beat Undertaker too. Especially if it's going to be the last match of either guy, of Undertaker or both of them. So Undertaker going over in that situation would not be a huge deal in my opinion. But for Wyatt and Undertaker, this is the same guy that went 21-0 at WrestleMania. He won 21 consecutive matches at WrestleMania for over 2 decades. So why in the hell would you have him book him to lose 2 years straight? I mean, after winning 21 matches, he's going to start a losing streak going forward. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So, I mean, the win-lose situation, and they're not going to do like a double count-out, which I know some people have pitched. That would just be dumb for WrestleMania. They're not going to do a DQ or a count-out or something stupid. But, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't want to see this match. I mean, I think it could be very, very good. It's a nice boost for Bray Wyatt, but neither of them can lose. And I think Undertaker, I mean, if he lost, I'd be okay with it, but it still doesn't make any sense. For the guy to go undefeated at WrestleMania for over 2 decades and then to lose 2 years in a row, I mean, the chances of that happening are just very slim. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, I won't judge it until we actually get the feud. I mean, at this point, it's being heavily teased on TV recently, so we'll have to wait and see where it goes. But I think the feud could be great. Yeah, like you said, the only issue that I have with it is the win-lose situation, because neither of them can lose right now. On that, Brad Burdar, his question was, what was your favorite match from NXT TakeOver? Well, the last 3 were all great. And if you said any one of those matches were your favorite, from the Divas title match, or the Women's title match, excuse me, to Adrian Neville versus Finn Balor, to the main event between Owens and Zayn for the NXT title, I would not fault you whatsoever, because all of those matches were fantastic. So you can easily credit any one of them being your favorite. For me, all of them were amazing. I think the main event probably takes it as my favorite. And it wasn't the in-ring spectacle that a lot of people expected it to be, which I think is completely okay, which if not amazing, because for a few reasons. Because that match, that great wrestling match, I'm sure we're going to get between Zayn and Owens at some point, whether it be on NXT or when both guys get called up. We're going to get that match at some point, so I'm not worried about that. For me, like I said earlier in the video, I'm a sucker for a great story, and I think they told a fantastic story in their matchup last week with Kevin Owens owning Sami Zayn, just beating the living shit out of him, and kind of telling the same story they did with Cena and Lesnar last year at SummerSlam, and they told that to a T. And Zayn, John Cena did a very good job of selling too. Unfortunately, coming back a week later from the injuries, but and we know that's not the case with Sami Zayn because he was not at the NXT tapings the following night. But Sami Zayn is a lot different in that you have no choice. He's so sympathetic. He's such a sympathetic character that he was perfect in that role, and you couldn't help but feel bad for him when he lost that title to Kevin Owens. And Kevin Owens is such an amazing heel. He's a great beast of a man. So it succeeded in making him look very, very strong and making you feel sympathetic for Sami Zayn. And it saves that rematch for a later date because Sami Zayn was never pinned. So for all of those reasons together, collectively, I thought this match was great from a storytelling standpoint, and I really, really enjoyed it. And all the other matches too, I thought were great. And no discredit to them, no disservice to them, because I thought Neville and Balor was very, very well wrestled. Easily one of the best matches of the year to date. I know it's only mid-February, but still. And the women's title match, I'll get to that in a couple minutes, but I thought that was great as well. Next question here. Why did so many people hate the Baron Corbin versus Bull Dempsey match? I really was not a fan of the match, and I can see why people were shitting all over it. There were a few botches. The no disqualification stipulation served no purpose. I think they may have brought in the chair in the final 15 seconds or so, but aside from that, the stipulation was really null and void. The whole feud has been kind of a bust. I know Baron Corbin won 3 times, but then why did you have him break? Why did you have his undefeated streak end in anticlimactic fashion? And RJ and I were talking about this last week on the show, in that maybe they wanted to end it so his character didn't become all about the streak, and if they ended it, then his character would be dead. I understand that, but to have it end in such anticlimactic fashion was really, really weird. But still, though, Dempsey got nothing out of this feud whatsoever. I thought he was okay. He is good. I'm not a fan of Dempsey, but I do think he's good. But then you job him out to Baron Corbin on 3 consecutive occasions to the point where he's dead in the water. There's really nothing more he can do with him. I don't know if he's completely damaged, but he is definitely up there. So the match was not good, especially compared to all the other matches on the show. That was probably it. I mean, on any other card, it would be okay. On an ordinary episode of NXT, I wouldn't have minded as much. And the botches are to be expected because it's the developmental territory. So, I mean, these guys are rookies, so you got to expect this kind of thing is going to happen. But, I mean, I think in comparison to Utami and Breeze in the opener, and the women's title match, and the #1 contenders match, and the NXT title match, that was probably why I think it was the worst match on the show, which is not too harsh considering how great all the other matches were, but that's probably why. There were a few botches. Corbin won in 4 minutes. I'm still waiting to see that breakout performance from Corbin, and we'll have to wait and see for that to happen, but that was probably the reason why a lot of people did not like that matchup, because the no DQ stipulation, above all else, really served no purpose, and you don't get no DQ matches too often down in NXT, so to hype it up as this big matchup and then not deliver was kind of unnecessary in my opinion. His next question was, where does the Fatal 4-Way from TakeOver rank amongst the greatest Divas matches of all time? I wouldn't rank this as a Divas match because that was a women's wrestling match. That was great. I mean, I'm thinking right now, not even that, not just that match. I thought that match was great, but you take into consideration Paige and Emma from the first special, Charlotte and Natalya from the second special, Charlotte and Bayley from the third, and Charlotte and Banks from the fourth, and including this one from the fifth special. They are among, if not, the best women's wrestling matches in WWE, take my word for this, in the last 10 years. I cannot think of another match in the last 10 years that came close, for the women anyway, that came close to matching this. We've had a few good matches here and there with, I really enjoyed the AJ-Caitlyn match at Payback 2013. That told a great story, but the action was nowhere near as good as the 4-way that we saw last Wednesday. Insert your own sexual joke there. But yeah, I thought that match was great, and there really isn't any other match that comes to mind in the last 10 years, with the exception of the final few Trish and Lita matches at Unforgiven 06 in the final few years. That was when the women's division officially died. That was when they stopped caring about the women. And Mickie James did a lot to bring that title back to prominence in her feud with Beth Phoenix and a few others, which was good, but those matches were nowhere near as great as the matches we've been seeing in NXT. And just from the perspective of how they're booked and how they're positioned on the card, that match at NXT TakeOver was second to last of I think 6 or 7 matches. It went on second to last on the show, which was fantastic. And it really goes to show how much they care about their women down there. And it's unfortunate because once they get to the main roster, like Paige and Emma did, they'll suddenly realize that they do not give two shits about the women up there, which sucks. And it's very unfortunate because they could be utilized in such a better manner. But of all time that you said, I don't know about all time. I mean, I wouldn't call it like the best Divas match of all time because I'm sure like the Lita Trish matches, like I mentioned before, are definitely going to be up there on the list. But I would definitely say they're up there. This match, Paige and Emma, Charlotte and Natalya, all those matches are among the best women's wrestling matches that I've seen anyway, since I started watching in 08, and maybe even before that, dating back to when Trish and Lita were around 10 years ago. So that's, saying a lot, but I'm definitely, confident in my answer there that these are some of the best women's wrestling matches that WWE has had in the last decade. His next question, Cody Rhodes has turned a lot of mediocre gimmicks into gold. Do you think that if he really tried, he could become an actor? Good question, actually. I was reading that, and I was like, you know what? Maybe he could. That's a good idea. Not in like the level of a Rock or even a Batista recently with a Guardian success in the 007 role or anything like that. He doesn't really have the look of a Rock or a Batista, but, he does have a movie star kind of look, and I think... and like you said, he turns a lot of mediocre gimmicks into gold. The mustache thing, which I thought was so stupid, he owned it, so credit to him. The mask thing from a couple years ago, which again was so stupid on paper, he made it gold, like you said. And the most recent one was Stardust. I hate Stardust, but he is so dedicated to that character that you got to give him credit for, going through with that role. So yeah, I think he's a great actor. And I was going to say, I think wrestling's in his blood, so I don't know if he's ever going to go over to acting, but... Then again, so was with Rock. Rock's a second, third generation star as well, and he went on to become one of the biggest actors in Hollywood today. So, I don't see the same success for Cody Rhodes, obviously. He was not on the level of a Rock in WWE, obviously, nowhere near as close. But I do think once he's done with wrestling, which hopefully won't be anytime soon, I think there's a lot of untapped potential there, that he could do something in the acting world. Maybe not even, like I said, not on the level of a Batista or a Rock, but maybe somewhere on the level of an RVD. He was doing some indie movies, or on the level of Edge, who's appearing on Haven right now, something along those lines. I think the first step in doing that would have to be casting him in a WWE Studios movie, which would be pretty cool. So the next time they do one of those, I mean, those movies are rarely ever good, but I'm definitely going to check out the one that Dean Ambrose is going to be starring in. I don't know when it hits or comes out on DVD or whatever, it gets released, but I did want to check that one out because I think Dean Ambrose is great. So Cody Rhodes, I think, should be among the candidates to be cast for the next WWE Studios movie. And don't say it's unrealistic either, because Ted DiBiase, who was like a henchman in Legacy back when he was in the Marine 2, back in 08 or 09. I know they had big plans for him. It was a little different. Obviously, those didn't pan out as well as they wanted to. But I think Cody Rhodes, there is a chance that he could be, cast in that role. And once he, performs well in one of those movies, maybe he can get more success, on the acting and an acting career once he's done with wrestling. At the Wrestle Guy from Twitter, his question was, out of the current NXT roster, who do you believe, if any, will be the first to become WWE Champion? So of the current NXT roster, I think Roman Reigns, they're currently building up as the first NXT guy to win a WWE World Heavyweight title, to win the Royal Rumble, which I think is garbage. I know from like an FCW standpoint, since they rebranded NXT in 2012, for me, that would have to be Daniel Bryan. I mean, Daniel Bryan from the NXT brand, not from like the developmental brand, but from NXT, from when it first started, almost exactly 5 years ago. I think 5 years ago to, not to the day, I think it's 5 years ago to next week, to next Monday. But still, though, I credit Daniel Bryan as being the first NXT guy to win a world championship, to main event WrestleMania, the most successful guy of that bunch. But that said, though, of the current NXT roster, Zayn, maybe I would have to say, is up there. Zayn, Owens, or Balor. I think all guys are going to be so successful in the main roster when they're eventually called up. They're all stars. Zayn, his size obviously is a factor against him that might work against him when he eventually gets to the main roster, but we saw with Daniel Bryan that, sky's the limit for even the smaller guys. But I think even Sami Zayn has that connection with the crowd where he's going to get over organically no matter whatever role they put him in, and he could find main event success if they book him properly. And Kevin Owens, I think he has the size. He's a big guy, but he's also amazing on the mic and amazing in the ring. So I think he could have a lot of success when he's eventually called up with feuds with Dean Ambrose, with John Cena, with Randy Orton. So many stars in the current roster I could see him mixing it up with and having dream matches with. And Balor, too. I've said this before, but Balor radiates superstardom every single time he comes out to the ring, every single time he makes his entrance and has matches. The match with Adrian Neville was a prime example that I could see him, eventually breaking out as a WWE champion one day. With all the potential that he has, all the upside that character, that entrance he has, I could definitely, absolutely see him becoming something big in the main roster when he eventually gets called up. And they would definitely have to try. I mean, if this guy's going to fail, they would have to go out of their way to make sure he does fail, because there is no way that they could botch his push in the main roster if they really, really tried, because this guy is amazing, and I think he's just naturally great, and I think he is destined for great things when he eventually hits Raw and SmackDown. Your next question was, would you be interested in seeing a special in which the NXT superstars face the main roster superstars? So this has been pitched before, and the only issue that I have with it, although it's a cool concept, the only issue that I would have from it, from like realistically speaking, because on paper I think it'd be sweet. The only issue, realistically speaking, is that WWE would position it as like the losers, the rookies, the people that you should look beneath, that you should look under at, whatever, against the main roster guys that are so much better. And that was the issue with NXT the first time. Every single time a pro faced a rookie, almost always the pro won. And it did the rookie no favors. And the match wasn't even that good, so the rookie looked strong in defeat. It was a complete waste of time. That's what TNA did. I mean, I know TNA and WWE are completely different, but when they did that whole gut check thing a couple years ago, that complete failure of a concept, they had it was like the rookies or whoever was trying out for the role against a member of the main roster, and I think only once did the rookie win. This is out of like 10 times, and the only rookie to win, I think, was like Wes Briscoe, who was terrible. I think he's gone now. I'm not sure. I think he did get released about a year or so ago. But, yeah, I think the only issue with that idea, like I said, is the way that WWE would handle it. Like the fucking Invasion. I think the Invasion is a perfect example. Not exactly similar, but they booked like the bottom tier WCW guys against the main roster WWE guys, and there was no fucking competition. And I don't know if they would do that with the NXT Invasion, but we've seen an Invasion before in the form of the Shield, in the form of the Nexus, so I don't want to see necessarily that, but it would be cool to get a few dream matches, but again, I think the matches that you would see at an NXT WWE main roster crossover, like that kind of thing, you're going to get eventually on the main roster. Like, you're going to get Steen or Owens versus Cena one day, so you don't really need to see it necessarily at an NXT special. And so, yeah, that's the only issue that I would have with it, that they'd probably have the main roster guys go over to make sure that their main roster people didn't look weak, and all that other bullshit. And you hear all the rumors that the main roster people are currently frustrated that the NXT special is so great, and they're not making, they're not giving the time that the NXT guys are, and whatever else. It's so stupid. But yeah, that's probably one of the only issues that I would have from it. But if they were to do it right, I think it could be really cool. And final question here, Jordan Z from Facebook. His question was, do you see Kevin Owens as the next Brock Lesnar? If so, why? So someone asked us last week, like, who's going to be the next ass kicker on the main roster? Who's going to be the next big show, the next big guy, quote unquote? Kevin Owens is not a big guy. He's not a big show. He's not a Mark Henry, but he is a pretty big guy in terms of his size, and not in terms of like in height or anything. But he is stocky, I guess you can call him. I don't know what the right word for it is. He's not fat anymore. He lost a lot of weight, but still, I think he is on the bigger size. He is on the bigger side, and he has a lot of potential to kind of fulfill that role. Not exactly a Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is a fucking beast of a man. Like, no one's ever going to come close to being the next Brock Lesnar. But as we saw last week, and I can see where you're kind of making that comparison after last week's special, and like I said before, they kind of tied in the John Cena Brock Lesnar story from SummerSlam last year into the NXT title match, and they did it 10 times better with Zayn, selling his injuries and coming off as so sympathetic, and Owens coming off like a complete douche. So I think Kevin Owens, when he eventually gets called up, could be that next huge ass kicker. Could he be, like I said before with the previous question, from like theoretically speaking, he could be. Will they book him as such? Probably not. This is WWE we're talking about, and like I mentioned earlier, they botch a lot of the pushes of guys that come up from NXT. But I think there is the capability there to book Kevin Owens in that kind of role, because he has that persona about him. The fight Owens fight thing, his size, his in-ring skills, he can be a monster of a man. As a heel, I think he's amazing. I think as a face, he could be even better, even if as good, because I think he could be well-beloved in that role as well. But I think as the next Brock Lesnar, no one's going to be the next anybody. I don't really like saying that, because this guy's not going to be the next Rey Mysterio. This guy's not going to be the next Shawn Michaels. But if you mean, I could see what you're saying there. Could he fill in that role of Brock Lesnar that he currently has? Maybe not exactly, but I do think he could be booked as such if they were to, do it properly. Like I said, he's a beast of man. There's a lot of potential there. Kevin Owens, like Finn Balor, is a guy they would have to intentionally fuck over for a guy to not get over on the main roster, because Kevin Owens is great, and I think he's going to be successful in whatever he does when he eventually gets called up. So that's going to do it for this week's #AskYouSome video. Thanks, guys, for always sending in your questions. It means a lot to me. But if you want to send in a question, you guys can find me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Make sure to tweet me on there with the #AskGSM. You can find me on Facebook at Graham Juice and Matthews. Leave a comment on the wall, or to leave a comment on the post I usually put up on Sunday nights. And you can also leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to include that in next week's video. So as always, guys, thanks for supporting. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next Monday.